So I suppose we just wanted to, before I get started on my individual experience, just talk a little bit about, we're using the term self-direction, which Lorna used as well, and it does get a bit confusing, self-direction, self-management, and then there's kind of differences in understanding in different parts of the country, and then the agency, the National Disability Insurance Agency, has its own understanding. So I guess I just want to take a couple of minutes and a couple of slides with you to talk about how we're using it, certainly for Linda's and my presentations. So I guess what we know is it's been really, really powerful for people to gain control over their lives and moving towards their vision. One of the most significant ways that happens for people with disability is to self-direct their support and their funding. So, you know, for many years, as Lorna said, we have been in that A4B model. Often it's talked to as, you know, we've had programs, we've had fixed models that were largely driven by the provider, and they were worked out long before the person with a disability arrived on the scene. We talk about, you know, that one-size-fits-all sense that we have. I'm sure many of you, if you have a disability or you're a family member, are all too familiar with. Another friend of ours with a disability says, you know, I feel like I'm squashed in a box all the time. I want to get out of that service-driven box. So I guess by contrast, self-direction, as Lorna talked about, is when a person with a disability, maybe with the assistance of their family or their support network, has control over their support. Self-direction means that the person with a disability and family can choose who supports them, when they are supported, how and what they do in their life. And so to be in control or to direct your own support, as Lorna said, it doesn't mean that you have to manage and be responsible for all the tasks and all of the funding. And I guess even in Linda's and my two experiences, you'll hear some differences about what we choose to delegate and what we choose to keep control of or take control of. Thanks, Paul. Go to the next one. Hey? Oh, you're doing it now. Oh, you've nodded. Okay. That's very dangerous, you nodding, thinking that you know where I'm up to. It's good luck with that one. I think Paul and I'm going to take some choice and control here, Linda, and I'm going to tell Paul, but thanks anyway. Because I feel very comfortable with you all, so I hope you don't mind me just clearly indicating to Paul each slide. And yeah, Linda, if I forget, it'd be great to have your backup. So, you may know, some of you who, if you have been engaging with the National Disability Insurance Agency in Canberra already, that there are three main options in terms of the way that you can manage the money. So the first option is that it's NDIS managed. So this is where the agency holds the funds on your behalf. So when I say you're, the person with a disability and their family. Usually the person with a disability and the family will choose a service provider or providers, and they make an agreement about how and when the supports are delivered. And then once the support has been, you know, received or accessed, utilised by the person, the agency pays the provider for the support. This is the most common in the Hunter anyway. It's the most common option by a long way. And we'd probably say that it hasn't led to a great deal of change, particularly in regards to choice and control for people with disability. So many people who are agency managing or who have chosen to leave their money, if you like, with the NDIA are tending to do what they were doing before they transitioned to the NDIS. That's our experience in the Hunter. The second option is to have a plan management provider, so sometimes also known as a financial intermediary, and again Lorna spoke with that a little bit. So it's where the plan manager holds the funds and looks after the financial aspects of paying the providers of your supports and claiming back from the NDIS, from the agency, and providing monthly statements. They can also help with finding service providers, and negotiating agreements with them, and or help you employ them if that's what you choose to do. The final option is what I prefer to call direct payment. It's also called self-management by the agency. So that's basically when the person with a disability or the family member holds the funding for the supports. So this means that you're responsible for managing the plan's expenditure. And that's the choice that I've made, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that as we go. And you can also use a combination of these options as well. Thanks, Paul. Next one. I guess, you know, one of the really exciting things is that as people are self-directing, they're finding new roles as partners, creators and drivers of their own solutions. And that's the thing that we really love, Linda and I, and our friends in the Hunter who are choosing to promote self-direction, is new roles for ourselves. Thanks, Paul. Next one. So hopefully speaking of driving our own supports, and speaking of, I as a blind person am in a situation where driving is not legally available to me, which is probably good for all of you. But it's one of the really few things that I kind of wish I could do. And I remember feeling it really acutely when my friends were getting their licences, because it's a bit of a rite of passage, isn't it? And interestingly, in terms of dreaming on a literal physical sense, I often have a recurring dream where I'm sitting behind the wheel of a car and then realise that I shouldn't be driving and stop. So any dream interpreters in the room, you can come and talk to me in the break about what deep psychological issue I'm working through there. But so hopefully the slide that you have in front of you, or that you can see there, is I had a friend, and I must have talked to her about that at some stage, and she said she's a mad golfer, madly keen, passionate golfer. And so she said, why don't you come with me and drive the golf cart? Because she was going to this really nice, quiet golf course. And so I gave it a shot, and that photo is of my friend Anne and me, and Anne being my driving instructor, navigator, keeping me calm. She obviously, I was thinking about in terms of self-management, we did a bit of a risk assessment. We picked a quiet course on a Friday in the middle of term time when there's no families there. We may have neglected to tell the golf shop when we hired the cart who was going to be behind the wheel. You know what they say, easier to ask forgiveness than permission sometimes. So I did have a go, having a drive. Maybe move to the next one. Thanks, Paul. So as I got more used to it and took her hands off the wheel, sometimes she was, looking for her golf ball and that sort of thing. And I did start to have a sense of the exhilaration that you feel when you're responsible for a moving vehicle. And we didn't hit any trees, and we didn't hit any other people, and no harm was done. And in fact, I thought, wow, this is quite fun. And at some point, though, I did want to keep sliding back to the passenger seat. I stayed in the passenger seat for quite some time. She'd probably played a few holes before she went, all right, stop procrastinating, this is what you've come to do. And so I was giving that a go, and I realised, though, even while I was driving, for most of the time, I fought the urge to slide back to the passenger seat. And I had this little aha moment. I'm not going to call it a light bulb moment for obvious reasons. I had an aha moment, and I thought, oh, I remember Linda and I and another friend with a disability were going to an expo, and we were trying to create some signs for people to get them motivated to think about self-management, and we came up with things like be in the driver's seat of your own life. And while that is absolutely why we recommend self-direction, I realised that it's quite a challenging thing to do when we, as people with disability and families, I think you'll agree, are really good at being the passenger. We're really used to being that passive recipient. And so when I was having my challenges, fun, mixed emotions of driving the golf cart, I thought, wow, we are really asking a lot of ourselves as much as we might want to do it. It's a challenge, particularly when it gets a little bit hard. When my friend said, when my friend was out of the cart and she was facing it, and she told me to go left instead of right, because you know how when you're opposite someone you have to reverse the directions. And so she said, stop, when I nearly hit a tree. And at that point I thought, no, I'm over this, it's too hard. So that's my little sense of being in the driving seat has its benefits, but it also has its challenges. So be patient with ourselves as if it's a decision that you want to make, you will, as I did, stall the golf cart a few times. Next one, thanks, Paul. So how it works for me, actually, can I have a timekeeper? Because I was going to check my stopwatch as I went, but so can someone let me know when you want me to be about 5 minutes from the end? Hopefully it's not yet. But I'll stop talking soon. So Paul, thanks. So how it works for me is that I get a direct payment from the NDIS, which we just talked about before. I have a service provider. It is that A with B, definitely, who supports my vision. I call it shared management, and I'm not sure how regularly. That's not language that I've come up with through the agency yet, but it's language that I think says what it is and makes it clear that it's a partnership. So I control the who, the when, and the what of my support. Thanks, Paul. And yeah, I guess the shared management partner has some, so the service provider has, I was just trying to keep it as a shared management partner because it might not always be a service provider, but in my case it is. So they assist me with the recruitment and selection of staff. They pay the workers. They sort of handle the other legalities around employment, such as awards and working conditions and insurances and things like that. And it is really a genuine partnership, just in terms of the recruitment, because I've been quite specific with the service provider around the kind of qualities and things and attributes and values I'm looking for in my support workers. She will now occasionally find, if there's a particular person in the service that I have most of my liaising and connection with. So when I say she, it's one person locally at the moment, and she will, she's starting to get a sense of what I'm looking for. And so she actually found me one of my best support workers so far, just having heard me asking questions and expressing my needs. And so that's one of the good things about that shared management, is that I'm in control and I can say no, and I was on that person's interview panel. So she said, look, I think she might be really good. I'm going to recruit her anyway, but come and be part of it and see what you think. And so that, I guess, for me was a bit of a really good example of when it can work. So thanks, Paul. Oh no, are we already on the benefits? Sorry. Yeah, see, that's what you thought I'd do, isn't it, Linda? Get ahead of myself, or behind myself. So the benefits are that shared management gives me flexibility and control without the additional responsibilities that Lorna was talking about of being an employer. I think Linda will talk about the good things, and I wonder whether I'll do it at some stage, but I do see the transition to the NDIS as a journey. I've got the rest of my life to get it how I want it, and that might keep changing. So for now, that's what I wanted to do. It allows me to influence the way that service providers are responding to the diverse lives of people with disability. So I think, Lorna, you spoke about that as well, that, you know, it's that if we don't start saying what we want, if we don't start putting it out there that, hey, there are people around who would really like to share the practicalities with you. So I did it partly for myself and partly because I want it for other people with disability as well. Next one, thanks, Paul. So just a bit of a sense of how it happens. I know people want to know some of the practicalities of engaging with the NDIS. So this is how it works for me when I've taken the direct payment option and the shared management option. So the first step is that about a month's worth of support is paid into my separate bank account by the NDIA. So when I first had my planning meeting and I said, yes, I would like to take the direct payment option, then they put sort of the first months in to get me started. And then the next step is that I schedule my own supports. So while I'm working with this service provider, I do all of the liaising directly with them, with the support workers. Then the service provider invoices me for the support that I've had. Then the fourth step is that I pay the invoice. Then after I've paid the invoice, the money is paid back from the agency. So there's a form that some of you might be familiar with called the My Plan Purchases form. So you fill that in and you say how much support you had, and then they sort of put the money back in your account. So it's basically, as you spend it, it's replaced. So I had someone recently compare it to just when you have a prepaid mobile or internet, and it's just kind of, you keep topping it up. That's a little bit like how I've been trying to think of the NDIS arrangements or practicalities. Next one, thanks, Paul. So some of the tips, you need a clear vision, as Lorna said a lot of times, of what makes a fulfilling life for you. And I'm going to confess, don't tell anybody, but I'm going to tell you all, because that I in retrospect realise I haven't had a clear enough vision. So that's something that I will work on when I go back to review my plan soon. So you do need a clear vision. And one of the ways I've learnt that is because I haven't had one, and I have found it more difficult to get the practicality sorted. But plan how you will tailor your own support, whether it's freely given and paid, to work towards achieving your goals, to establishing and maintaining the valued roles that you have in your life. For me, that's been one of the most helpful ways to think about my support is, well, what are the things I do that matter? What are the roles that I have? And how can support be the bridge, if you like, that takes me from where I am to where I want to be, or allow me to do that role to the best of my potential. Think about your workers and the things that matter to you in a worker, their attitudes, their qualities, and the values that you seek. Think creatively about recruiting, so, you know, where you'll find the workers that you hope will meet your needs. And with your shared management sort of partner, and in my case, a service provider, develop your own agreement, your own specific agreement, detailing the roles and the responsibilities that each of you will have. That's something that the agency, the National Disability Insurance Agency, requires anyway, but it's a really, really good thing to do, particularly in a climate where, I mean, it was new for me to be in a shared management relationship, and it's also new for the service providers or the shared management partners. So while we're all learning together, having a really clear sense of who's responsible for what is a key thing. And so make sure that that agreement includes what matters to you, and especially the things that you're not prepared to negotiate on. Talk a bit more about that in a sec. Thanks, Paul. The next one. So where to start? I guess take time to find the right match to share your management with. Ask lots of questions, and just be really clear about, do they share your vision? Do they share your sense of what matters to you? I was quite fortunate in Newcastle, and because I am often speaking and the service providers are often in the same room at the same place at the same time, I would often, in fact, I'd forgotten this, but my service provider reminded me that I would say things like, hypothetically, would you do A, B, and C? So I guess I was often testing out those limits without wanting to let her know that I was too interested. So talk to service providers, and their workers whenever you come across them. I think I had other friends, Linda and her son Jacob, and another friend of mine, and I learnt a lot from about shared management and about recruiting your own workers. And I think I formed a lot of my sense of what matters to me in a worker from experiencing other people who had workers that were really good matches with them, and realising, realising that I wanted that as well. So it's really about observing. And I did just keep searching, so keep searching until you find that match. Sounds like I'm looking for a man, doesn't it? But it is a bit like that, I guess. It's got to be a really good fit. Know your non-negotiables. So thanks, Paul, the next one. So I guess I just thought I'd tell you about some of my non-negotiables. So just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about there. So choosing the support workers. In my previous service, I had limited choice over who supported me, and that was something I was not prepared to continue. Another one was that I had to directly relate to the person to arrange my support. I didn't want to have to ring a middle person, if you like, to say, oh, Linda, can you tell Jan that I can't meet her? That wasn't going to happen. not being restricted by the service and its policies in the kinds of support that I could have. I'd had some times where, work health and safety is really critical, but I'd had some times where I had been told that I couldn't have particular forms of support, like, yes, I will take you to buy that bottle of wine that you've asked me to because you want to go to your friend's house for dinner, but it really is against our drug and alcohol policy. And yeah, I will, and no, I won't climb up the ladder and get that blanket for you out of the high cupboard because it's freezing, because it's against our work health and safety. So I said, okay, I'll climb the ladder, but not wanting to, I'll climb the ladder, you direct me to the ladder, you direct me to the blanket, and maybe if I'm lucky, I'll hit your head when I... No, I don't condone violence against support workers at all. That's my pathetic humour. But yeah, so I wasn't prepared to have that happening anymore. Not needing my workers to have disability qualifications, that's something that I'm noticing a lot, is that people want the choice over their workers, and you can train them, and this is something I've learned a lot from Linda as well, you can train them, you can give them the training in how to do the particular things that you need done, but you can't really train them in their mindset and their values as easily. So I wanted to not be restricted, and I didn't want to have found this fantastic worker and then sort of force them to go and get a disability certificate. And I had the same issue with a first aid certificate. That might seem a bit controversial to some people, and for anyone with medical conditions and health conditions, you might want the backup of a first aid certificate, but for me it's not an issue. I don't have any additional requirements, and so again I just didn't want to have to ask them to do that. I didn't want to be restricted. No file notes was another one that I felt was pretty critical. I was laughing with Jan and Paul earlier that they call them progress notes sometimes, and I was like, I don't want to have to progress. I don't want to have to prove to you that I've progressed. I'm 44, and if I choose to be a bit stagnant for 6 months, well, deal with it. So, so no progress notes. And thank you, yeah, cool. And so that one actually was harder than the first aid certificate well, not with the service I found, but when I was interviewing prospective services and saying, hypothetically, would you? And they would all say, no. One of the other services said, it's interesting, I think the services haven't yet learned how to market themselves in the NDIS world, now that their funding is not guaranteed. So I had a meeting with a service provider, and I said, now what about file notes? Can we let them go? And it was the service I used to use, and so they said, I knew you'd ask us this. I knew you'd ask this question. And even though they knew I was going to ask them, they couldn't answer it. And I'm still waiting for them to get back to me. They were checking it out with their legal team in about June, and I haven't heard yet. So, watch this space. Yeah. But anyway, now you can, and I do think there are times when some record of what happens in support is important, and I'm not dismissing that again, but it's finding a creative way to do it, and it's also saying I'll take some responsibility for what happens. And so I do keep a bit of a record, but I had it used, again against me a little bit before. So I just thought, no more file notes, no more monitoring of progress. Next one, thanks, Paul. And so yeah, knowing those non-negotiables. So thinking of I guess part of how I came up with my non-negotiables was to think of the best support experiences that I'd had, and aim for those. So, when does support for me feel at its best? When it's mutual, when it's compatible, when I'm in control of what we do, And then I also found it helpful to think of the worst experiences, and I've just told you a few of those, and eliminate them. So if I could get rid of them, I would, and I pretty much have. And thanks, Paul. The next one. I guess for me, it is about knowing yourself in times of change. As Lorna said, they're big questions to think about when you're going to choose whether you are going to choose self-management or self-directing your support. And I realised that I haven't got it together yet. I'm actually it's good standing here talking to you, and I realise that, wow, I have sorted a bit of stuff out, but it's like anything in life. You take a couple of steps forward and then you go, but now what? And what next? And so some of my reactions to change, being a bit afraid and, stalling, not doing anything, happened as I was and still am trying to get the support the way I want it. So I get really, really busy, and I don't want to be locked into planning my support too far ahead. So I've kind of got a bit of in my agreement with the service provider, it actually, it's like I will plan to be spontaneous. So sometimes I've just moved out on my own too, and so sometimes there's not a lot of food in the cupboard yet because I might have gone just a little bit too long between supports. So because when I'm a bit anxious about something, I tend to do nothing. So it's really good to know the strategies that have worked for you in the past, whether it's talking to people. Know what gets you through when you feel a bit stuck, so it's just, I guess all I was really trying to say is seeing the change to self-direction, you're likely to behave and respond and react the way that you do in other times of change. So think about what's worked in the past and do it and try those things again. Find others who are further along the journey to help, and you guys have got Imagine More, which is fantastic. I've benefited a lot from other people who have been self-directing for longer than I have, and when I did get a bit stuck in knowing what sort of support I needed and how to best structure it, I went to those people and said, what do you do when you're trying to work out the best configuration for your support? I guess, and trust yourself and don't give up until you find what you're looking for. And hopefully it'll be eventually like it felt for me on the golf course. I didn't hit any trees, and I actually had a really good time, and I felt that sense of being empowered to work towards that good life that we were all looking for. So thank you.